Over to you.
The spot with low probability decision making. And I had spoken once on the subject of low probability decision making. I think sometimes early this year. I think so, yeah. And it's important to quickly take us back, memory lane on what we discussed during that conversation, which is a definition of what low probability decision really is. And it's as displayed on the screen here. It's a decision on action that is mostly always undertaken to take advantage of information, stakeholders, locations, and timing that are of low significance in prospect, so that leaders who utilize them gain competitive and strategic advantage while their values still appear obscure. So this is what basically make low probability decisions, strategic in nature. At the time that the information to take them are at the disposal of the decision maker, the data really appear to be of low significance, so that this kind of decision is something that is taken much more with an intelligence for foresight, and then the value is almost always recognized by hindsight for most leaders. So only the few leaders who are able to take decisions around this, territory, when the value and the significance of the data appear, to be obscure, they are the ones who can take advantage of the rewards that low probability decision, you understand, confers. And I think that is why very few, as we're going to see next, very few leaders actually tread around this territory. Very few leaders, use low probability decision making in their leadership activities. So to explain and describe it further, we can say they are actually big, bold, and potentially risky undertakings. Yeah, there is a measure of risk, which is also what makes most leaders not to attempt them. They require a lot of confidence and boldness in leadership and management balance to take. You have to be confident and bold about something that not many people are saying. For you to go that territory, you might just find out that you are probably walking alone in that territory. So there is a measure of confidence and boldness that is required to take those decisions. In biblical terms, we describe such confidence and boldness as faith. That's because when we look at this decision-making, area, we see a lot of lessons and examples from the Holy Scriptures. So I have always connected the subject of low probability decision-making with scriptural evidence and data, so that because that confidence that we need has to be provided and have to rest on a substance, and it cannot just be built on any kind of flimsy substance. So the substance for under which we can actually take low probability decisions, that gives us high impact, is to rest and to anchor on the information provided by the Holy Scriptures. It's on God, it's on Jesus, as we are going to see as we go on. So the outcomes are unlikely and they are uncertain. So naturally, most people avoid them. And like I said earlier, the advantages they confer for our competitiveness, they are often grasped in hindsight. It is when these decisions are terminated and the rewards have come that people begin to realize, oh, why it would have worked, if we had done it that way. But of course, at that time, the window is already closed. So now, decisions that beat the odds, these are still, ways of describing the same subject, low probability decisions. McKinsey Global Consulting did a study some years ago, nearly about 10 years ago, and they were looking at the kind of decisions that leaders and management people make that beat the odds, that confers the greatest reward. They found out, that these kind of decisions are what we can describe largely as low probability decisions. And they also discovered that not many leaders use this kind of decisions for strategic outcomes. In their study, which involves about 10-year study and involves thousands of executives, in large, and medium-sized companies, and even small, all over the world, they found out that barely 1 out of 12 executives, have the confidence to make this kind of big, bold leadership decisions. The way they describe this to be such, they said these are big, bold leadership decisions that brings along, a kind of, career and, performance changing result. They also realized that as a result of the inability of most leaders to do this, most organizations and businesses really perform at barely 8% of their potential, because leadership will not, commit themselves in this kind of direction. So which means that there is a 92%, opportunity or potentials lying fallow in most organizations, in most businesses. In fact, that report says that small businesses who really wants to become big players, their only approach, and the opportunity they have to be able to actually earn greater rewards and take some rewards out of those biggest players is for them to engage in this kind of decision making. But however, like we had said, barely 1 out of 12 leaders, will do this in their lifetime. Most leaders don't even do this in all their lifetime, career and leadership and management. So the crucial question we are trying to solve with this kind of activity we are having here today is to actually find out, why is it that most leaders are unable to make this kind of decisions? So, we shouldn't bother so much about why some leaders make it, but why is it that most leaders don't do it? So this kind of seminar this evening is something that is geared at encouraging more and more of leaders and decision makers to take this kind of decisions, to travel in this kind of territory, where seemingly, so to say, angels fear to tread. So we are linking it this evening to the concept of wasted effort. And I will just try to, to describe what I meant by that, so that we are clear. It's not diffuse, and broad, as it sounds, wasted effort. An effort is an endeavor or undertaking being pursued in order to accomplish a purpose or objective. So when I say wasted effort, it could be just a purpose and an objective, a personal one, an organizational one, a unit one, a constituency one, something that, a leader or a people or somebody is attempting to achieve. It could be short time, it could be mid-range, it could be long, time. So from time to time in life and business, we might find ourselves in situations and circumstances where we are putting much repeated effort towards the achievement of these certain goals and objectives, and we find out that, we are not really getting the result we need. And and when our effort appears to repeatedly fall short of this objective, it is possible for us to begin to describe those efforts as wasted. Why? Because we have not simply seen or gathered the result or the expected ends we are looking for. And this has a negative way of impacting our confidence and our decision making, so that, we might not just be able to continue in those areas, pursuing the objective, pursuing the purpose. And one thing is that once we have this cycle of repeated, inability to succeed at that task, like I said, morale drop, our resilience ability drops, so that a time comes in this kind of persistent effort where we are the call to turn around that cycle of repeated, failure or opportunity that is wasted. By the time we get to that tip and the point where we should do that, we might have lost all the resilience, and the motivation and the incentive to continue in that focused discipline of decision making. We might draw back, and thereby, losing the opportunity to turn around, the situation, the effort, for eventual success. So that's a paradox. And that paradox is what I described in the last, bullet point. I said that if you persist in an undertaking that looks impracticable or feasible to most people, you will be charged with wasting your time and effort. So we should look at a few, examples and case studies now after this slide. So one of the reasons why leaders don't turn around wasted effort is because they are unable to make low probability decisions, which we have explained, because that's about the only kind of decision that allows you to beat the odds that you are faced against. And because of the failure or lack of success, resilience drop, morale drop, and we are unable to try again, even when the opportunity to turn around this cycle presents itself. So the paradox manifests in this condition due to the fact that the very next challenge you are unable to accept at trying again can be the very one that offers the needed success or breakthrough. Of course, there are plenty of examples in organizational innovations and success to explain this. That when a particular undertaking is pursued and is followed up to a point, and because investment has gone in, energy has gone in, and there is no quick result, organizations quickly leave that place for something else. An example is the story of Indomie noodles in Nigeria, which I've often shared in sessions like this, where Nestle brought this product into the market. And because, after a few years of investment with trying to promote Maggi, their own seasoning with that product, and there isn't too much, receptible market appetite for that product, the business was sold by Nestle to some, smaller players, who then took that business and then experimented with a few, other, kind of seasoning, and the business changed overnight and became, a pot of gold, that is an all-time winner even till today. So if Nestle has persisted long enough there to do some few more experimenting, they should be the one reaping the rewards of that product today. But just at the point at which, some little more effort would have changed, the story. They left off, and somebody else came in and, reaped on that, effort that they have put into that product. So, but let's go to the Bible now. Remember that I said that I always connect this to the scriptures, because the scripture still provides, the most, reliable evidence in terms of time span, in terms of, volume of, documentation, in terms of precedence, that anybody making this kind of decision can stand upon, particularly as people of faith who are believers. And there was the story of Peter in the book of, Luke chapter 5, verse 1 to 11, where they had spent a whole night fishing and getting no results. They've done this at the right time they should do it. They've done everything the business school taught them to do, and their professions and their experience have taught them to do in that activity, and they've caught nothing. And then they were actually packing up and finishing business for the day. It might be time to even sell the business in terms of contemporary parlance, or to get out of the market territory to some other place. But Jesus Christ came in there and asked them to return to that territory or wasted effort. Of course, the result was something that was unprecedented in all the history of their work in that industry. They got a result that was mind-blowing. The story of Isaac in the book of Genesis 12, Isaac was looking to get a source of water for his livestock business, and we were told that every attempt he made were contested by the Philistines. Wells were filled up. The ones that he was looking to dig, he was driven away from it. But I'm quite impressed by Isaac's tenacity, because he continued to do that. And at the point in time, there were two things that followed suddenly. The narrative just changed without any warning. He actually struck an aquifer, like an underground spring of water, and then subsequently there was also a particular well that they were able to find, which he then called Rehoboth. That is from that point in time, after the long effort, which seemingly were like wasted effort, they will now begin to flourish in the activity and the business. Joshua led the Israelites, in the Jericho conquest. And when God instructed them to just keep walking around the city, for 7 days, and on the 7 days to do it 7 times, circling, which I like to call, the perfect, cycle of wasted effort. 7 days, around the city, on the 7th day, 7 times to do the same thing. It's not impossible that a lot of people, even among those Israelites, might have begun to wonder what this is all about. For nothing was happening day after day. And on the 7th day, one turn after the other, nothing was happening. But just at the point in time when it might be, this all of this effort seems, to avail to nothing. The wall of Jericho, without any mechanical aid, without any effort, simply came down. So the effort was rewarded. And I also like to use the example of Jesus Christ's 3-year ministry of discipling 12 ordinary men, day and night. It all looked like the effort was wasted, really, when it was captured, by the Jewish, ruling council, and it was sentenced to be crucified by the Romans and the Jewish, rulers. His disciples were scattered and they all ran away. It seemed like Jesus Christ's 3-year effort had come to waste. It seems like whatever he had said he was going to do with this group of people had all evaporated. But then he resurrected, and at his resurrection, these people were able to regroup with confidence and boldness to start declaring his mandate. And that mission and mandate had outlasted every idea, mission or venture in terms of the universal influence, over the last 2,000 years. So all of this and more are pointers to us, are lessons and examples for us that when we are persisting at a particular objective or quest, that may be described by a lot of people to be impracticable and to be not to be feasible, or be charged with wasting our time and effort. We can persist until we get to that point where there's a turnaround. This is one of the low-hanging fruit for me when we are talking about low probability decision making, because there are several areas of this decision making that would appear to be sophisticated and to be a bit on the higher plane. But I know that almost everybody in life who has had an objective or something to do and make decisions over them will most likely, be confronted with what this cycle of wasted effort is. Even animals confront this cycle. Lions, in their hunting, a lion would not begin to enjoy hunting, will not begin to recoup those 92% potential effort of wasted result if he had not first spent the initial years wasting a lot of energy and time learning to kill smaller animals. They expend more energy and more time and more effort, and they get little or no result for it. But by the time they come of age, through tenacity and continuous practice, they begin to bring down, big animals, which compensate, for all the years and the time of wasted effort. So I feel that this is an area that almost everybody, whatever we do, however small or big it is, or little it is, we are likely to have an opportunity and a window to be able to make, low probability decisions in the course of our journey. It's something that most leaders don't do, for the fact we have stated above, because, they consider it to be possibly impracticable, to require a lot of confidence, and the appetite and the risk is something that, people can be too careful about. Now, let me take a few case studies. There is a time that, when Bob Marley died in the early 80s, the highline music was looking for another African, a black musician that will replace Bob Marley. Finally, they came to pick Sunny Ade in Nigeria. And then they tried to work with Sunny Ade and rebrand him, bring him to the global stage, and present him as a sort of, a new Bob Marley, a replacement for that, for that brand that they have lost through Bob Marley's death. They worked with Sunny Ade for about 4 years or thereabout, but eventually both the artist and the company, they had to part ways. They just couldn't work together, because Sunny Ade, he would say that he had already built a followership that is strong, and his identity is strong enough. He would not be able to do a number of the things that island music would expect him to do, to modify his musical style so that they can appeal to what they call a much more global and diverse audience. But Sunny Ade was basically like, look, I'm already an international musician. I have wide acceptance, globally. Yes, I may not be as big as Bob Marley, but Yoruba language and percussion are the things I do. And if I move away too much from this, I would have a problem with my established followership. I cannot at this point in my journey and career, afford to change dramatically to become something else from what, people had known me to be. So as a result of that, they had to part ways, So it seemed like island music investment in Sunny Ade was a waste. All the global tours, all of the public relations and everything, But about 10 years later, the same island music was still, of course, looking to get, an African musician that would basically, repay their investment or be in the league. They found another musician in the Benin Republic, a woman called Angelique Kidjo, who basically, of course, speaks both Yoruba and Fon, one of the traditional language in Benin Republic. But when they started working with this lady, she was singing more of in the Fon language. I used to listen to the lady too when I was in my early teens. She sings more of the Fon language, and then so when island music came in and took her up, what they simply did is they move her, most of her, music from that Fon language to sing more in Yoruba. And the reason is simply because island music had already worked with Sunny Ade. They have all the data, all the information. The Yoruba language is a much more marketable, instrument for global music. There were audience, they knew where the market is, where the audience was. They've done all of that with Sunny Ade, and they had to part ways, and all of this were resting in some kind of files and folders. So as soon as they took this lady up and she could sing Yoruba, what they simply did is to, channel her to do more in that direction. And within 2 years of picking the lady up, she had become, in fact, she ended up in the 90s becoming basically the biggest, African musician under the Highland Music Institute. And all of our major hits were basically Yoruba songs or songs, that are, derived, from Yoruba worldview. So about 10 years later, that cycle of wasted effort was turned around by Highland Music, a big international business. It's a lesson that, efforts, in terms of innovation and breaking new grounds, efforts that have been put into a particular objective, which seemingly is lying fallow, they are basically not, to be considered totally wasted. There should be effort to build on it until we get to the point where the information and the data we align, and we can have, a turnaround curve. The next one is networking exercise commitment. This is my own personal experience. Many years ago, I had interest to do something around, cultural and historical materials in the city I grew up in Nigeria, which is Ibadan. And I was gathering a lot of information and data around that city, which are of interest to me. I was talking to many people. I wanted to do something that would showcase that city that could be connected to tourism and things like that, local indigenous content. It's a lot of kind of work that didn't seem to be making any headway, but I was just putting it together, talking to people and then all of that. So I had a friend around that time, after about 4 years I've been doing this, yes, who had come into Nigeria from the US. He was a very big networker. He travels around a lot. That's basically what he does. Networking for him is just like breathing, and he spends money on it, flying all over the world. So when he came to Nigeria at that time, he was actually sharing my office, so he was using my office more like a place to stay. So we were able to talk. So he started encouraging me. Well, as a result of having him nearby, I asked to start doing more networking. There were many meetings. The meetings, in fact, you check his calendar every week, plenty of meetings, global, regional, national, local, and he has a lot of energy. I couldn't even mark the energy, but at least I was trying to tag along, go for a few meetings that I consider, might be helpful. And when I even look at, the meetings, I will feel like, oh, I seem to be wasted. These meetings were even too much for me, So I'm not sure that, all these meetings I'm attending really pays, with my time. So at the point in time, I started slowing down a bit on it, So it will send invitation to me, it will give me notifications, and I will not go. So this particular day, I was running a training program for a business that I was supporting them. We just hired a new operation manager, and I was doing some onboarding, 3 days onboarding for the new manager. On the second day was when he called me suddenly to say that, can I come? And I was doing this on the mainland. He said, can I come to Victoria Island, Federal Palace specifically, that he wants me to meet a set of business from South Africa, who had come in. And he just they were telling me about things to do, and it felt like I could be of help. So what is the problem? He told me. And I said that, but I don't seem to have anything to do with what you have just said now. He said, yes, that he's seen, but he just felt like calling me that I should meet with them. I said, but you have told me that these guys are working in this sector, and I don't think I have anything that really I'm doing around that. I don't want to waste my time, and I have something I'm doing. He was persistent. So I said, okay, I can't come in today. Tomorrow, maybe I will check tomorrow, but I'm not yet made up my mind. So eventually I felt like I should go. So I had to rearrange my schedule with the trainee that, okay, please, let's take tomorrow off. We'll continue, the following day. So I took tomorrow off and went to, and I met, the business. We talked. And like I said, after talking for the whole day, there was really nothing I really could do, because they were not looking for something that I have direct experience or, or precedent in. So, but there was one of the business people who was talking to me from Cape Town. And then, so she said that, okay, that we should have a meeting, 2 days later, which I then accommodated in my schedule. So I came for that meeting, So we had a meeting and we're discussing at the meeting. And at the point in time, she invited the delegation leader, which was the government official that led the businesses from South Africa to Nigeria, and then so over breakfast, we just met introduction and we talked briefly. So they started talking about an issue. And as they were talking about that issue, between this delegation leader who brought the businesses to Nigeria and there was an argument. So in that argument, the woman mentioned something that, well, my primary objective for the government, apart from the businesses here, is to look into 1 or 2 industries in Nigeria. And she mentioned the 2 industries, that this basically is a primary goal for the government, the report she had to give. So when she mentioned that, it then happened to be something that, I was interested in. In fact, something I have been researching in for my Ibadan project. So that was how, I just, made, some comments. And in about 5 minutes, we had a conversation. That conversation was 5 minutes. And from that point in time, that was how I actually got, a brief to do some consulting work, for 2 regions, 2 provinces in South Africa, and then, which was also, in fact, the brief, has a foundation component and then a multi-year, one. So, and I keep looking at it that this was a meeting that I almost didn't, go for, that appeared from a distance that it had nothing to do with me. It has actually given me, in that time, the biggest kind of opportunity and the highest level of work I would have done, anywhere. And it was with, an effort that I consider to be of not much significance and is wasted, lying somewhere in my records. And also this networking call, which I almost passed up, for another waste of time and effort. So then we know the Thomas Edison story, that he kept returning to the electric bulb trials without considering that he had 999 attempts until the 1000th one got it right. If he had given up, at the 999 attempt, you can be sure that the next one attempt is the curve where it was to turn around the wasted effort. So most of the time, when we get to this point in which, we are at least able to accept challenges, that is when we really need to actually accept the challenge. This has been found to be a major paradox that affects the ability of companies, organizations, business to turn around innovation. Because at the time, that we really needed, a new challenge, we are at least able to accept it. Just like Peter was saying to Jesus, we have worked all night and we are washing our nets, It wasn't easy taking that challenge, but thank God that, it was able to listen to Jesus and it took that challenge. Of course, Abraham Lincoln, like we all knew, all of his efforts at nearly every pursuit and endeavor, including lesser one, were basically not, successful until he got to the point of the highest political office he contested for, which he won as president of the US. So this wasted effort paradox, we found out that only human beings have this aversion to persistence, persistent effort. I have talked about lions, for example, and mammals, how they have a lot of resilience. They don't consider the effort that are gone to waste as wasted. They see it as a learning process, as a stepping stone to build further capability, for success. If we have the same kind of orientation that animals have, we would read that most of what we consider to be wasted effort will not eventually become wasted effort. There will be something that leads us, to some major high impact results. But because as human beings, we are wired to see these activities as wasted because they don't give us the immediate result or they don't meet our mid-range expectations. So we have a lot to learn from animals, from even plants, trees, the way they lose their trees, even the waterfalls and rains. Much of their output, goes into places that looks like, it's a waste, but then the whole ecosystem benefit from it. Only humans think that lack of success in a few attempts is failure. But the truth is that we only fail when we stop trying, So baby bear dies, and half of them die before poverty. Half of the eggs of fish are eaten as prey. Rains fall into oceans. Most trees are eaten by birds. Even science has proven it that we are the only ones that is averse as human beings, to this paradox of wasted effort. And the Holy Scripture too has proven it, that we are averse to it. So, and that's why I was connecting us to the Holy Scripture, for a solution. So let's look at some scriptural, examples to encourage us to take advantage of this paradox with the faculty of faith. So I have mentioned the story of Isaac, how Isaac, persisted, and eventually even Jacob in his work with Laban, and in the until he had the breakthrough in the way the animals were cultured to give him better results. Persistence, 14 years of working and seemingly having no result. And it was about giving up when the angel appeared to him and told him what to do. There was Joseph too. His dreams and the visions he had. It was about giving up. You may remember they was telling the cupbearer that the request he wanted is to go back home, but that was just where it was at the point, of changing things. If Joseph had been so discouraged and despondent in a situation, and he hadn't had enough, incentive and morale to interpret the dreams of these two guys who were with him, for a brief moment, in just 3 days, when he did the interpretation, his destiny would probably understand, had been stuck. But thank God for Joseph, that the morale is there, the incentive is there. He was able to carry himself in that situation, minister to those guys, and in 3 days' time, those guys would leave that place forever. But in 2 years' time, what he did within those 3 days will later come back, for the cycle of wasted effort, to reward him. We have David, in the issue of Ziklag, when David arrived from the Philistine front, and found that his city had been burnt, his wives and all their children had been taken away, and it looks totally wasted by a band of marauding Amalekites. The Bible said that these valiant men, they wept until there was no strength in them, and they were even thinking of stoning David. But he summoned the courage, said he encouraged himself in the Lord, and then decided to ask, Lord, shall I pursue? And God started to speak to him. And we need to study that. We will see how low probability decisions are made in that story. How a number of things that didn't seem to add up connected together to take David, to the camp of the enemy, and he was able to recover her. There was Ruth, who had lost it all in marriage to a foreigner, and just like the other wife, Orpah, would simply have called it a day, but persisted and determined, to return, a decision to return, with Naomi, And at the end of that return with Naomi, we saw the result, that what looked like wasted effort, the years of wasted years and effort, returned back, with full reward. There was Moses, his 40 years in Egypt and 40 years in Midian in particular. How, that was turned around. He will later be coming back from Egypt, to the promised land. And all of the knowledge, he had gathered in Midian will be put to use in leading the Israelites back, into Canaan. There was Joshua, which I have told the story of Joshua. I've told the story of Joshua already in in the demolition of Jericho wall. There was Joash, the king of Israel, in Second Kings 6 and 7, where Elisha the prophet prophesied, and said that by this time tomorrow, the economy was going to change overnight. There will be bargain basement, purchase of items and all of that in a famine. So we see that by the time the prophet said this to this very strategic, and militarily wise king, that this gate, will be open and all the items will come in. The king's reaction when eventually they were told that the Syrians had run away and they've left everything intact for people to just come and pick. The king's immediate reaction as a strategy is that, come on, look, these guys are deceiving us. They just wanted us to open the gate of the city and that they will come in because we know we are hungry and will kill all of us. So at the point, where victory, is about, to replace defeat, and where the cycle of, innovation and waste is to be turned around, the king actually refused to open the gate. He still kept his strategy. So flexibility is important, and embracing of new ideas, is important in order to turn around, wasted efforts. And then Peter, I have told the story of that, in Luke 5:11. So the last slide says the rules of thumbs. What are the some rules that I want to leave us with? These rules were actually taken from Luke 5:1-11. So say, keep your tools operational and ready for the next opportunity, regardless of the poor result at the moment. The result at the moment might be poor. You may not have what you're looking at, but keep your tools ready. Keep, developing yourself. Keep your understanding at the edge, of your trade, of your ministry, of your mission, of your industry. Be ready for the opportunity may come, at any time. Then embrace new ideas and stakeholders. Peter did that. He welcomed Jesus, and share, his asset with Jesus. So try unconventional advice from time to time. And after giving Jesus a place in that ship, when Jesus was talking to him that, do this again, he was able to listen to Jesus. So new stakeholders, new ideas, new suggestions are also important to turn around the cycle of wasted effort. Then also be ready to accept new and bigger challenges when it appears to be least convenient for you. I have said that a lot, that when most organizations and leaders need to accept a new challenge, to turn around the cycle of wasted effort, that is when they are least able to accept it. This is true severally in many organizations. It is true in how American Express became a financial powerhouse. It is true, you understand, like I said in the story of Indomie, it is true, you understand, in several innovation history of businesses and individuals. It is when we most needed to accept a new challenge that we are least able to accept it, because we have spent a lot of effort already and we don't think, it really makes sense to go in that direction. Just like I felt I shouldn't go for that network call, it's going to be another networking, and then what am I going to say, will be my result, particularly when it doesn't seem like what they are saying, they align with what I know I had interest in, I was doing. Then number 4 said that be sure to be subject to the oversight of a chief stakeholder when you have experienced cycle of losses. If we have faced cycle of losses, we need to be under people who are more experienced than us, who are more knowledgeable, so that they can actually review what we are doing from time to time and give us their own perspective, so that we can actually, draw the lines between efforts that are not, really, really meaningful, and the ones that we are simply not reaping reward from on time. So it's important to be under, subject to, what I will call, an oversight, mentor, or discipler, or leaders, as the case may be, so that they can regulate what we are doing and send us out, from time to time on what we are doing. So this is necessary to ensure compliance safeguard against paradoxes that cycles of losses often can foist on decision making. For Peter, Jesus Christ is actually the chief stakeholder that I refer to here. Every believer who makes decisions in their life for any objective or purpose of business should have Christ as the chief stakeholder, not only just individuals. But the imperative of this for anybody is that when you have such oversight over you, they can compel you to do things that ordinarily you would not want to do as your own inclination. If you get to the point at which you are now at the tip of turning around your wasted effort, and you feel like I've had enough of it, I don't want to do it again, Such an oversight can say that go and do it. And because you have to compliance, you do it, and then the result comes. But if there's no one to actually tell you to do it, if you are the one who had all the shots on what you do and what you do not do, you will simply walk away from the point where you are poised to turn around the cycle of wasted effort. If as believers, we've come to a point in which we feel all is lost, and like David did, we go to God and say, Lord, what shall we do? We might then find God ready to tell us the step that we are going to take to turn around the cycle of wasted effort and recover all like David experienced. So thank you. I will welcome questions and comments.